I heard a lot of people were getting sick, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. It looks fun. So yeah, that makes me a moron. But I think I have 30 minutes of voice left, which is good because I've been looking forward to presenting what we're going to talk about this morning. And if you can look past all of the distraction of the sound, I think there's going to be something really good here for you. We're doing a series about the shocking words of Jesus. It kind of came to light because I've heard a lot of people say, I like Jesus, I like his teachings, but I just don't like the religion that came from it. And I mean, you want to have some compassion for that because you can see some of what they're talking about, but the hardest part that I have with that is I don't think they understand the teachings of Jesus. The teachings of Jesus can be hard to understand. At a minimum, they are difficult to live out. They're not something that you would be warm and welcome to. So we're going to look at that this morning. We're going to spend some time on a parable. Parable is a made-up story. It's not real. I don't know if it's going to help you that it's not real. You may ask yourself as you hear this story, if Jesus could have told any story he wanted to, why did he tell this story? Now here's what's interesting. You kind of have to know this piece for this to make sense. For Jesus, the telling of parables was intended to be a difficult process for people. They were supposed to get into a discussion with each other when they heard the kind of teaching. By the way, I did a search on Google for group discussion, and this is what it gave me. How messed up are we? Right? So it was meant to be discussed. It was meant to be a little confusing. You weren't supposed to know exactly what he was talking about unless you worked it through with somebody else and maybe you came to a place of understanding. There are parts in the scripture where Jesus told a parable and then said, let me tell you what this means. He had to do that because his disciples had no clue. There are times where his disciples would go to him and say, could you tell us what this parable means? And he would explain it. This was normal. Like if you leave here today and you look at each other and you're like, I have no idea what he was talking about. Your conclusion would be, he stinks. Like he shouldn't be doing that. But for Jesus, if you left and didn't have any idea what he was talking about, that was success. It was supposed to get under your skin, and you were supposed to try to process this to figure out what in the world he's talking about. If you want to find a disturbing, hard to understand parable, we're hitting the mother lode today. This is going to be fun. So I want to take you to Luke chapter 16, and I'm going to read a lot of it because you have to see this to believe it, okay? It starts, Jesus told his disciples, who he's talking to is really important. The crowd is important. He's talking to people who like him and want to be like him. That's what a disciple was. They're trying to learn as much as they could from him. They were trying to do what he did, live the way that he did, so that when he passed, they would be able to carry the message of that rabbi to more people. So they're in. These are followers. This is not just the 12. There's probably a group of 100 people who followed Jesus from town to town. He's talking to them. These people are in. Some of you may be that way right now. You may be like, hey, I like Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. Others of you, you may be trying to figure out where you stand with faith. And this story could be disturbing to you. But I want you to hang in there to the end because I think there's something valuable for you in this story as well. Okay? But he's talking to those who are followers. And this is what he says, verses 1 and 2. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this that I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. Now the manager is fired. And from what I can tell, the accusation against him is accurate because the manager would have said, hey, I can produce books that exonerate myself. None of that happens. He's clearly pulling a fast one on the rich man. He's gotten caught for it, but he's been given one more official task. Bring the accounts and show me exactly where everything is before you're done with your role. Okay? So, verse 3, the manager realizes he has a problem. He said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg." He has some boundaries for himself. He knows he's not strong enough, but he's also a little proud because he's not willing to do whatever it takes to survive. I'm not willing to do that. So he comes up with a plan. Verse 4, "I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he hatches a plan, and this is how it goes. Verse 5, "So he called in each one of his master's debtors, and he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' Verse 6, the guy says, 900 gallons of olive oil. The manager told him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, make it 450. He's cooking the books. Like he has one last official thing to do, which is to present the accounts to the rich man before he's done with his job, and he's changing the accounts. Poof, 450 gallons of olive oil, gone. Verse 7, then he asked the second, "And how much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. Now, I don't know if the irony is lost on you or not, but what was this rich man accused of doing, or what was the manager accused of doing by the rich man? Wasting possessions. If he wasn't, he is now. And if he was, he's taken it to a whole new level. Like he is just blowing through this stuff like crazy. Now here's where it gets weird. This is verse 8 of this made-up story that Jesus is telling. The master commended, praised, thumbs up. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. That word shrewd is going to come up several times in this little passage. And I knew I had to go look it up because sometimes in the Greek, there's a couple meanings for a word. And I was like, okay, you got to get the meanings right because surely one of those is crafty or dastardly, a little sneaky. It's got to mean that. And so I went and I looked it up, and there are two meanings for the word shrewd in the Greek. And here are the two meanings. One is wise, one is prudent. These are both positive compliments. How is it that this is happening? Like, you have a guy who's ripping you off. You catch him. You call him on it. The last thing he has to do is just show you what's left in the accounts. And he changes the accounts, ripping you off for even more. And you compliment him? Like if you're looking for a disturbing parable that you would have to discuss to understand, Jesus is killing it. Like he's getting it done here. But he doesn't stop there. Because the second part of verse 8, he provides some commentary to this little story that he's telling. Listen to this. He says, "For the people of this world are more shrewd," there's that word again, and it only means two things, wise and prudent. They're more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of the light. People of the light. People who are followers of God. The people who have chosen to say, hey, God's really important to me. I want to orient my life around that. He's saying, listen, this guy is more wise and prudent than you followers of God. Now, I don't know how that strikes you, but it's one thing if you want to tell a fake story about a fake guy who fake steals and gets a fake compliment from a fake rich man. Cool. But when the moral of the story is that you followers of God should be more like this man, that's disturbing. That raises a lot of questions. Like, Jesus, I'm trying to be a person of the light. And I look at the choices that dishonest man made, and I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong for him to steal. I think it's wrong for him to take care of himself above all else. I don't want to be like that. And yet, Jesus is holding this story up and saying, hey, I think you should be like this person. I tried to put this story into a modern setting for myself to try to understand like the difficulty of this story. I'm going to put a picture of somebody on the screen. If you recognize him, can you yell out his name if you know who that is? Anybody? Bernie, perfect. Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff is the architect of the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Here's how it worked. He went over to this group of people and he said, I'd like you to give me some money, and I'll return 8% on everything that you give me year after year. And people was like, that's a good deal, and they gave him money. But he didn't invest a dime. He didn't do that. What he did was he went over to these people and he said, I'm giving these people an 8% return on their money. They're doing pretty well. You should do the same with me. And these people gave him their money because these people were doing so well. And he used the money from them to make it look like you were making 8%. And then he went over here and he said, I'm really helping these people. You should give me more money. And he used their money to make it look like these people were getting 8%. But he never did it, never invested a dime. If you do that long enough, you dig a deep hole. When Bernie finally got caught, he had lost, wasted, disappeared $64 billion. Like, hey, we use these numbers like we know what they mean. I don't think we grasp how significant this is. So let me help you wrestle with this just a little bit. Tell a person next to you, like, just do a quick guess if you can. How much time passes, days, weeks, years, how much time passes in 1,000,000 seconds? What's your best guess? Tell somebody next to you. If you're just throwing out a guess, what do you think it is? Okay? Did anybody say around 2 weeks, 11.57 days? Anybody? Okay, somebody said yes. Okay? All right. How much time passes in 1,000,000,000 seconds? 1,000,000,000 seconds. You're trying to do the math. This is going to be hard. Let's look at it. 31.7 years. Do you understand the massive scale of this? This guy lost the money of grandmothers. He lost the whole savings of some couples and different people. He lost money that not-for-profits had actually put into their accounts with him. Some of those not-for-profits went bankrupt and had to close. That's this guy. How would you feel if Jesus said, hey, this guy had some prudent and wise things that he did. You should be more like Bernie Madoff. How would that set with you? Scratch your head, wouldn't you? You'd wonder, what in the world are you talking about? You'd hope maybe that somewhere along the line there's some sort of character trait, like maybe Bernie Madoff took all of this money and he spent some of that ill-gotten gains to help a bunch of kids in youth sports or something like that, where he supported thousands and thousands of kids all across the country. He didn't. And the story of the guy in the scriptures is not concerned about anybody but himself. He is trying to secure his own future, which is exactly what Bernie did too. It's just about himself, just about how he would choose to live. So how do you reckon with this idea that this is the kind of person that you should emulate? This has caused problems for people over time. In getting ready for this, I was actually bringing in just a lot of information, and I came across a video podcast on YouTube where 6 guys were sitting around discussing this parable, and they were utterly perplexed. It wasn't these guys, but that's at least a discussion, right? So they were having a discussion about this. And one of them said, I don't know why this is in the text. I don't understand why Jesus would say something like this. It seems completely off. It seems wrong that the messaging is that we're supposed to be like this person. I don't get it. And the discussion went on for a while. But I never think, listening to that whole discussion, they never landed on a reasonable explanation for it. They were all just perplexed. The thing is, I think there's some stuff in here that's meant to lead us to what Jesus is talking about. Because I don't think Jesus had any intention of suggesting that this rich man was pleased that he was getting ripped off. That's not what this is about. The rich man would not have gone, that's so wise of you to steal from me. It's the wrong thing. What he was commenting about was the reason behind what he was doing. If you'll remember early in verse 4, he said, I'm going to do this so that I'll be welcomed into the houses of other people. He had a why, he had a reason for doing this, and that's what was going on. We make a mistake thinking this was about this moral thing that he was doing. It's not. It's about this. Let me ask you this question. Do you think you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours works? I'm not asking you if it's right or wrong. I'm asking you if it works. In Jesus' time, clearly it did. Because that's what this guy was betting on. He's banking on the fact that if I do something for you, you do something for me. And I want to tell you, I don't think our culture is that different than Jesus' culture at all. We have all kinds of different ways of saying it. You have my back, I'll have yours. You do me a favor, I'll do you a favor. You take care of me, I'll take care of you. Why do we say all of those things? Because it actually works. People make choices and decisions based on how you have treated them. And what Jesus was doing was he was going, listen, what's happening in this story is this guy had a problem. And he decided to look at the system that was operating in the world, and he took advantage of that system. And that was wise. What he did by taking advantage of the system was wise. Now here's where it gets interesting. I don't think this has anything to do with being crooked. I don't think it has anything to do with glorifying stealing. It's not about that at all. This is about the rich man saying it was smart of him to understand how the world works and to use this. And the reason we know this is because of what Jesus says in verse 9. And he's going to say this to followers, his followers. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. This gaining favor thing is not about the here and now. It's about how the system works, and that Jesus was concerned that the people of the light didn't understand the system and weren't working the system. Well, how does the system work? Here's what God does. He gives you all kinds of resources. He gives you time, he gives you energy, he gives you money, he gives you jobs, he gives you, like, all kinds of stuff are given to you. And you make choices every day how you'll use those gifts from God. Will you use those for the sake of kingdom values, or do they simply get spent on you? Do they simply advance what you want, your desires? Do they elevate you in the process? And Jesus was saying, listen, I want you to be faithful. I want you to be good and faithful students or servants. If you want to be that, then you have to start looking differently at this world that you're living in. You're not doing this for the here and now. There is a bigger reality at play. The reality is, this world that I've created is an opportunity for you to invest in stuff that matters in God's kingdom. Your time, your energy, the choices that you make on your job every day. All of those things matter to God. And they add up, not as a bribe. It's not a bribe. It's an attempt to say, I know where this stuff came from, so I'm going to honor you above all else. And in the honoring of God, it helps other people. It advances kingdom causes. I've seen that happen at Waypoint. I've seen a lot of people get involved in a lot of things where they've made incredible sacrifices of their time, their energy, their resource, their money. I've watched it. But you know why Jesus is saying this? You know why he's saying this to people who follow him? Because it's so easy to be pulled towards comfort and ease. It's so easy to be pulled into a comparison trap where you look at what somebody else has and now you make that your goal. It's so easy to get pulled into evaluating what you want to accomplish in life, and now it all becomes about you and what you're going to accomplish and the goals that are important for you. It's easy to see the stuff that pops up on your phone. And you say, yes, I want that, I need that. I need to fulfill my desires here and now. That's what's really important. Jesus caps this off. This is a very popular verse. Verse 13. Band, if you'll make your way up here. He says, no one can have two masters. Either you hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. This verse gets talked about all the time. Did you know that it was connected at the hip to a very disturbing parable that was meant to cause you to wrestle and think about whether you're living a shrewd life or not? Am I being wise about my time? Am I being prudent with the resources that I've been given? Am I doing the job that I have effectively in a way that honors God? These are the questions that are coming to mind. Why? Because there's a bigger reality at play than just this here and now. And if you understand how the system works, you're living for something that's bigger than now. By the way, if you're here figuring out faith, that would be the part that I would offer up to you, is that if you're not careful, you could pursue everything that this life has to offer. You could fill your life with it. You could get all kinds of goods. You could get fame. Like, you could fill Maslow's hierarchy, self-fulfillment, all the way to the top. And you will feel empty because there is a bigger reality at play. And unless you're living for something bigger than simply you, it will end up not satisfying. And maybe today is just time for you to make a choice and say, listen, I've been wondering about this, but maybe I need to choose Jesus because I have not been satisfied. This has not been going great with my life. I keep adding more, and there's always still a hole. There will be without Jesus. And if that's you this morning, it's just this simple. Just tell Jesus, I need you. I've been doing this on my own, and I don't want to anymore. I want to be a follower of yours. Help me understand this bigger reality that I'm in and start taking steps towards him. But don't miss this. This story was told to followers of Jesus. We were meant to wrestle with this, to ask ourselves, are we working the system the way God made it or not? I hope you'll think about that, because Jesus thought it was important enough to put into a disturbing parable for you to process. My friends, are you working the system that God created?